Hey, welcome back to the channel and another short story of exactly 1,000 words. Now, I know what you're saying. This is episode 101 and not 100. That is because I did a live stream of episode 100. I had some participants even who rode along beside me. So that video will be coming later because I'm giving them time to get their stories in readable condition so I can add all of the stories to the video. So that's going to be coming up a little bit later, so it'll be out of order. But fear not, it will definitely happen soon. It was definitely more stressful doing it on stream, chatting with people, selecting the artwork, knowing people are watching you right. Now, I've done that before on NaNoWriMo, which I'm definitely going to do again this year. But I don't know, something about doing something within a time constraint. So needless to say, it took me a lot longer. I think it was almost 2.5 hours the clock was on that last one, but it was a lot of fun and something I'd like to do again in the future. Probably not all the time because it does definitely take some time to dedicate to it. And I think there's just something different about when you're sitting by yourself and you have the music playing and you're in isolation and you can kind of escape to that place, to the story. But again, had a great time. Thanks again for those of you who stopped by and wrote a story even those of you who did not. Thank you for hanging out with me for a little bit. But anyway, let us talk about episode 101. And the first thing we always talk about is the soundtrack. And because there's kids in this artwork, and we'll see that very, very soon, something struck me about a movie I saw a long time ago, starring Matthew McConaughey, and it's titled Mud. It was a great movie. It was part of his reign in the indie sphere. Once I think like Surfer Dude or something was the last mainstream movie he did, and then he had his McConaissance, right? Or something like that. But anyway, this soundtrack is by various artists, but I had to kind of omit some of the tracks because there were some vocalized tracks here, but the composer is David Wingo or Wingo. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. Those are the selections, and that is the vast majority of this album that I listened to. Why don't you cue up those gothic Deep South tunes, and let's check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is titled Dragons Rise. It's by Sergei Grechenyuk, who is a concept artist from Kharkiv, Ukraine. This is actually one in a series of illustrations. They're kind of like cinematic keyframes, but they were all separate posts, and this is the one that kind of caught my attention the most. It's the most, to me, cinematic, the one that offers, at least to me, a more inspirational means to tell a story. So let us take a closer look. Well, we have these two kids in the foreground. There's a boy on the right, and he has a stick in his left hand, and further to his left is a young girl, and they are on this beach. It's a very cloudy sky. The waves are crashing, and we see this twisted tree out in the water. But inside that tree, in a breach, in a hole, there's this light coming out of it. So I'm not sure if there's a dragon inside. I'm not sure if there's something else, but clearly he was trying to tell some kind of story visually. And if you're curious, you can go to the very end of his keyframes if you check out his profile, and you'll see that it's kind of what you would expect. Unfortunately, it's fantastical. It's about these two kids. It looks like they're journeying to another realm, but I'm probably going to take it a very different direction, as you know. Thank you, Sergey, for the amazing artwork. I absolutely enjoy the composition. I love the storytelling implications. Obviously, that is why I chose it. So, with that said, let's see what I came up with. Max whispered words to Emily she couldn't hear. Her closed eyes were squeezed tight, lids trembling like his hands pressed over her ears. It's far away, Max said. I'm here. Here was a small bedroom in a 2-bedroom apartment, a bed in the center, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, some on the floor, some stuck to the wood-paneled wall behind Emily. She looked so small, wedged in the corner of the room farthest from the door, which bowed with every punch. Max didn't know if there were punches for sure, but he couldn't imagine anything else making a sound like that, making the door shake like that. His sister, as calm as she'd been since all this started, Max glanced over his shoulder to face what they couldn't escape. All was still, silent. Max's heart filled his throat. He couldn't breathe. How long could he hold his breath? He watched the door through that stillness that didn't seem real, and imagined himself deep underwater, like out at Mead River, where he and his little sister used to dive for river rocks, and they'd let those rocks soak up the sun on the bank, and then when they were good and hot, they'd lay on them and pretend they were smoldering coals, like Max had seen a man walk over barefoot. He'd tell Emily he would one day be a famous fire sleeper because fire walking was too easy. And she'd say, "Max?" Max inhaled. His heart fluttered as their room and his sister came back into focus. Yeah? He wished he could start over, take that stutter back. Emily's eyes were still closed tight. Your hands hurt. Max threw his hands down, foreign and heavy as bricks. He put them behind his back before they became fists. I'm sorry. Emily opened her eyes. Tears budded in their corners. They looked like pearls. Is it gone? Max tested his voice at the back of his throat, considering another look over his shoulder to check the door so he wouldn't be a liar. Either way. But his throat betrayed him, and he said, I don't know. Emily frowned, and her tears no longer looked like pearls. Can we get out the window? Or on the second floor? Hide under the bed? Emily, you know that's for kids. Her eyes were like deep river rocks. But we are kids. That pained Max's heart before burrowing down into his stomach. He almost said he would be 13 in 26 days, and that a teenager wasn't a kid. But Emily knew his birthday, and she knew that when you were 13, you were still a kid. Just like he did. Emily darted under the bed. Hey! Max whisper yelled. Her shoes stayed out as she dug around, and Max thought of her little brass baby shoes she'd put in the fire, because she didn't believe there were real shoes underneath. She'd really got it then. Max hated himself more now than then for not doing anything. That guilt was a hole in his chest he could never fill. If only they both could crawl through it right now. Emily scooted out with a stick in her hands. She was at the riverbank again, ponytail and cut-offs dripping, kneeling in the mud. Look at this. It's just an old piece of wood, he said. Driftwood? That's only at the ocean. Nuh-uh, rivers too. Someone brought it from the ocean and tossed it in. Emily stabbed the mud and stood. Look at it. Max shrugged. Emily lifted it high by one end. The sword. It's just a dumb stick. Can I bring it home? Nah. Bugs and who knows what else. I looked. No, you didn't. I did. She'd been right. No bugs, and Max had checked. Even tried to tease any out with food. She looked at him now, how she'd looked at him that day. That dumb old stick, Max said. Glad I brought it back, huh? Thunder pounded on the door. Lightning flashed in the cracks as it bulged from the force. Emily leaped into the corner again, dropping the stick, which rolled across the floor to Max's bald hands that were still heavy as bricks. He didn't look away as the storm raged on. He couldn't believe those were words. Take it, Emily said in a moment of quiet. You take it. I can't. Why not? I'm not a big brother. Max felt that hole in his chest grow so big he thought it might swallow all of Earth. Take him and Emily with it. Then another hole formed, in the door with sharp teeth, and through it, fire shone. Max's hands had somehow picked up the stick, and his feet had somehow stood him up. See? Emily said by his side, her tears cut like diamonds. He didn't see anything much through his own tears that muddied his vision. Driftwood is only at the ocean, he said. All manner of sounds roared through that hole in the door. Okay, Emily said. Okay, Max said. Max tensed his muscles so they'd stop shaking. The stick stabbed to the floor at his side. You're holding it wrong, Emily said. She mimed the pose she'd had that day at the river. Sword, remember? This was stupid. He was stupid. She was to fight the monster in the cave. Yeah, she was stupid too. It's not a cave, he said. It's an old giant tree on the ocean shore with a dragon inside. This sword is the only thing that can kill it, because it was part of that tree at one time. Washed up on the shore, and no one thought it was powerful. They thought it was just a dumb stick. He looked at her. Except a brave little girl. The hole in the door widened. Splinters fell. Fire flared. The dragon roared. Max held the driftwood that was a sword high, like the brave little girl had showed him, and he faced the dragon. Welcome to the End Dear Viewer. I'm so glad you made it. This is where I talk about my final thoughts, what I liked, what I didn't like, and maybe what I learned. So first and foremost, subject matter of the story may be uncomfortable for some, but it just kind of hit me when I saw it. I wanted to make this picture not a literal representation of what a story might be, but a metaphorical one, or one from the imagination of a kid, because I think that the image itself is very imaginative, right? I mean, it really conveys that aspect with the tree out in the ocean and the light coming out of it. But I wanted to take it a little bit, a step further, I guess you could say. I wanted to take it into a different realm, use it as a lens to explore child abuse. I'm sure, hopefully you grasp that from the story, that these kids are not fighting a dragon, right? There is something terrible going on in their house. There is somebody trying to seemingly break the door down and get them. And there's some hints here and there that Emily, his little sister, has gotten in trouble in the past, and that they fear this person who they call the dragon or the monster, and they are contemplating how to escape this danger. But it really reminded me, so when I was a kid, don't worry, this isn't traumatic for me or anything, but I had a babysitter who would hit my brother and I with a belt that had a big old cowboy belt buckle on it, a big metal one. You know what I'm talking about. And it was really scary. It's one of those things that you think, you always wonder like why kids don't say things, or somebody who's being abused doesn't say something. And particularly when you're a child anyway, because I've had that experience. I don't know, it was really hard for me to tell my parents that. I remember eventually I did, because I remember they were out, I think shopping for a car at a car dealership. My memory's fuzzy, but I was pretty little. And they were telling me that this woman, and I think her name was Sheila, something like that. But if you're out there, I'm talking about you. I remember this. And they were telling me that they were going to have her babysit us again. And I remember my brother and I were just like freaking out, because I have very, very vivid memories of that, and getting hit and just kind of seemingly for no reason. And it made me wonder that like she must have just been a very abusive person without being prompted to be like that. Because I've really tried to look back and think about, what did I do? What did me and my brother do that would deserve something like that? But anyway, I channeled that. It's funny now that I'm talking about it, I wasn't really thinking about it while I was writing it. It just sort of manifested. Like once I finished the story, that memory popped in my head. So again, subconscious, right? It's all coming from the subconscious. Even when we're consciously writing and crafting a story, that's what's, again, so what I love so much about storytelling is all of these life experiences and things you've had happen to you, just like good or bad, or somewhere in the middle, like influence what you're doing. So hopefully that idea came across in the story. I wanted to really tell that story without being overt about what I was doing, and hopefully that happened. But anyway, let us begin. We have this little boy named Max, and he's sitting with his sister in the corner of this room, and he has his hands protectively pressed over her ears, because something is happening. We don't quite know what it is yet. And we just have an indication something is bad when Max says it's far away and I'm here. And then I use the next paragraph as an opportunity to just very sparsely describe their environment. I'm not trying to create really a sense of subtext or atmosphere from the character point of view. It's almost just kind of like an omniscient description of the room, with the exception of the final line where I describe how Emily looks, how she's so small, and then this door is like about ready to break in. And I start to allude to the fact, well, I describe that there are punches, and Max didn't know if there were punches, but he couldn't imagine anything else that would make a sound like that. And then what I tried to do is tell a little bit of a story through flashbacks, right? But hopefully they all informed what was going to happen here. There's little hints that I peppered throughout, most of them unconsciously, like these fire rocks. So we know that there is fire in this thing. There is a dragon. I mean, it's called Dragon's Rise. The title was obviously an inspiration to me too. Not literally, of course, but he's holding his breath, because just there's this moment of silence, as if there's a break of whoever it is that is breaking down the store. And he imagines them hunting for these river rocks, right? Just something they did out in the summer, and then they would lay them out on the grass, and they would let them dry and soak up the heat from the sun and lay upon them. And, Max deemed himself a fire sleeper because fire walking was too easy. Just some little aside to explain the relationship between these kids, and also an opportunity for me to inject some of, not the message, so to speak, but like some more hints at this monstrous thing, like the fire. But I cut away from that with her speaking. And then his first words after that reverie are, yeah, and he stutters and he wishes he could take it back because, you know, constantly throughout this thing, there's almost like an internal struggle as well as an external struggle that sort of Emily is not really privy to, but he's dealing with it. Max is dealing with it, and so he wants to be the strong brother, and he wishes, he stutters immediately, and he wishes he could take that back. And then he realizes he's causing her harm when she says your hands hurt, and so he throws them down. And again, he put them behind his back before they became fists. You know, again indicating his mental state, not to think that he's going to become like whoever this person is to break down the door, but again, it's just a hint at what he's thinking and what's going through his head in this moment. And he apologizes as if he's, you know, hurting her, like it's his fault, like pretty much everything that's going on is his fault. And this is another technique I did, and hopefully it was obvious, but I have tears in her eyes, I believe 3 times. And the first time he sees them, they look like pearls, right? Which is kind of a hopeful sort of thing. She asks him, you know, is it gone because it's quiet? And he unfortunately doesn't know. And he's as scared, if not more scared than she is. And she starts bringing up these ideas about going through the window. And he's like, no, you can't do that. Hide under the bed. And so this is kind of illuminating her age, her childishness, the fact that he is a little bit older than her and hopefully more wise. But it says a couple of wise things, I think, in this thing when he tries to correct her and saying, Emily, you know, that's for kids. And again, here's another indication of sort of him thinking back. You know, his eyes were like deep river rocks, which is obviously hearkening back to his reverie about swimming and diving for river rocks. And she says, but we are kids. And that hurts him, right? That hits him in the chest, that sort of just deflates him and knocks him down a few rungs. And he starts thinking about, you know, hey, I'm going to be 13 in 26 days. And I'm not going to be a kid. So this next paragraph is almost him defending himself, but then tearing himself down because he has this realization, right? That Emily knew his birthday. She knew when you were 13, you weren't still a kid. That's really him understanding the truth of the matter, just like he did. And then she dives under the bed, and he's alarmed. And then here's another instance that I was trying to allude to, the abuse. I don't know if it was super clear, but he sees her shoes sticking out of the bed as she's rummaging around in there, and he sees these shoes. And I'm not sure if you guys out there know what this is, but I have a pair of baby shoes that are bronzed, right? So he's imagining those things, right? My parents have this. There's a photo of me as a kid, and there's these little 2 booty shoes on there that have been bronzed, which is kind of a ridiculous thing to do. But hey, I don't know. Maybe it was an 80s thing. Anyway, I bring the fire back, right? Because they must have had a conversation as a kid where he's like, hey, your shoes are in here. She's like, no way. And then so she throws them in the fire to see if it's going to melt and reveal those shoes, even though it's not going to melt at that temperature. But this is an opportunity for Max to remember that, not to just establish their relationship further and some kind of past and of abuse, but also to put something on himself, right? Because he didn't defend her then. This was a moment where he's thinking back, because we know at the end of the story he does defend her, or he at least tries to defend her. I didn't play out how everything unfolded, but just the fact that he's deciding to do something is really what matters. And this is where I began talking about the hole in his chest, right? That he wished they could both crawl through it and escape. And I use that opportunity as well for the hole that is created in the door when this person, this parent, this babysitter, whoever it is, breaks the door down or breaks a hole in the door. And so that was sort of an echo, right, that I use, or imagery that I use to help kind of carry that through. But then finally, Emily comes back. She's got a stick in her hands. But then we have another reverie, another flashback to where they're back at the river and arguing about this piece of driftwood. And the key thing here is that he believes driftwood is only at the ocean, which I honestly thought that was true. I looked it up while I was writing it, but in fact, you can have driftwood in rivers. And so I had this little argument about them. And then again, this is him asserting himself as a more mature individual, right? He's saying like, no, you're a kid. Driftwood is only in the ocean. You don't know what you're talking about. But when she starts to say like it's a sword, you know, as a kid might do, and he says it's just a dumb stick. And this is a key word or key phrase that I bring back toward the end when he's sort of giving her credit, right? He's admitting his wrongs, not literally, but he is doing it in such a way where maybe she doesn't understand. Maybe she does. She seems like a smart kid. but at least it helps for him to say it aloud. And so that was a key word that I reused later. And she says, hey, there's no bugs in it. We can take it home. It's fine. It's fine. And he even tested it, and she was right. And this is when it brings back the memory of that dumb old stick. And she says, glad I brought it back, huh? And this immediately is when the thunder starts pounding on the door again, and she leaps away, afraid, dropping the stick. But it goes to his hands, his bald hands that are in fists. And she's telling him to take this. This is their weapon. This is what's going to save them. But he immediately says, I can't. You take it. And she says, why not? But then this is what hits him when she says, I'm not a big brother. So that is the moment where it just hits him, right? In the first moment, all of his guilt is kind of piling up on him, but this is when he feels that hole in his chest grow so big he thought it might swallow all of Earth. Take him and Emily with it again, right? So this is just overwhelming. But then this is also the impetus. I thought this was a good midpoint where the other hole formed, right? The one in the door with sharp teeth, and through it fire shone. So now we're starting to create that image, or the beginnings of that image anyway. And he picks it up without thinking somehow, right? It's all subconscious to him. And she says, see, like she always believed in him. And this is another thing, another image where I said her tears were cut like diamonds, meaning sharp, blade-like, powerful, strong. That is what I was trying to convey there. First, the tears being pearls, then them not looking like pearls at all, and then finally them coming back stronger than ever as diamonds. And all manner of sounds roared through that hole. And but before that, he says, driftwood is only at the ocean. And this is him making a bargain, right? He's saying, like, look, if I'm going to do this, we're going to play by my rules. This is my story. This is my thing. And so, but she agrees. He doesn't know if she's going to, and she says, okay. And he says, okay. But she reminds him how to hold this weapon, how to hold it like a sword. But he still thinks it was stupid. He was stupid. She was. And then to fight their monster in the cave, yeah, she was stupid too. But this again is when he asserts himself. This is kind of taking a spin from the driftwood comment when he says it's not a cave. It's an old giant tree on the ocean shore, etc., etc. So he's concocting the story. This is when the image that you see in the artwork is sort of, in my mind anyway, it's starting to just completely materialize at that moment. But this is also when he gives credit where credit is due, right? He admits that he was wrong, and he almost admits that he needed his little sister to help out in this, quote unquote quest. The key thing, obviously, is when he says they thought it was just a dumb stick, meaning his words that he said twice actually. Except the brave little girl, the wise one who realized it was in fact this magical stick that was a sword, pulled from this gnarled tree, and it was the only thing that could defeat this dragon. And then finally, this hole opens bigger and wider. Splinters are falling. Fire is flaring, and then the dragon roars. And then finally, Max, he's holding the driftwood just like his sister said, and he decides to face the dragon. This one was fun for me. I liked having all the subtext, the sort of fantastical imagery that wasn't literal, right? I think, again, fantasy and fiction obviously is a great way to explore things like these. And also, I didn't want to show the outcome of it, right? I didn't want to show them diving into this hole. At first, that's what I was thinking I was going to have them do, like just be out literally on this ocean looking at this strange thing and concocting stories about it, and maybe it relates to their lives or their relationship or other friendships or something like that. I didn't go that way. I decided to make it a imaginary place that was sort of created by Max and obviously his sister too, and I wanted to have these two characters not just be two characters in a scene, right? I feel like I read this once, I can't remember where, but every character in your novel and your story needs to have a purpose. They're not just there for background. They're just not there for set dressing. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity to have, kind of a little bit of a tug of war between these two kids. We have a classic trope of the older kid thinking he knows best, and then the younger kid coming out all the wiser. So that is a very classic trope, and I use that to my advantage here. Hopefully it wasn't too cliche for you. And then obviously there's a little bit of wordplay, carrying things like hole and then her tears throughout the story, and using those for not only for imagery, but for subtext. But yeah, I think overall I was happy with it. I think if there was one thing I would change outside of, obviously prose things and things like that, would be adding like more maybe sound effects, like a boom or a crash or something interspersed between the dialogue or the moments to just give more attention maybe. But other than that, I think it's pretty solid. I'm okay with it. Obviously, I'm going to go through this and edit it quite a bit, but I'm always excited to write ones like these that I don't feel like need major overhauls in terms of how they're structured. But I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear any feedback you might have, as always. And thanks for hanging out with me, and keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.